There are many smells that we experience over our lifetime, and some of them are memorable while others are not. Occasionally, you may come across a scent that takes you back to another place and time. For instance, the smell of fresh cut grass may conjure up memories of Dad mowing the lawn on Saturday morning. Lighter fluid on charcoal brillets may remind you of a barbecue that you had as a kid. Recently, I ran across the fact that Hasbro trademarked their Play-Doh smell in 2018. It certainly does have a distinctive smell that is sweet, slightly musky, and vanilla with a salty wheat dough. A smell trademark like this makes sense when we're talking about perfume or cologne, but I have not seen this on any other toy. I do find it interesting that Play-Doh went from 1956 to 2018 before they had that trademark. This got me thinking about some of the other scents that I've experienced in the past, and I wanted to showcase some of those. Some of these scents are still around, but they aren't quite the same. Others are just completely gone altogether. In today's video, we are going to take a closer look into the smells of the 1970s. Some of the smells from the 70s are somewhat difficult to describe. In many ways, they were just something that one would need to experience in order to know. One of those scents was leaded gasoline. This smell was around before the 1970s, but at times people were just thankful to experience this scent because of fuel shortages. Unleaded fuel, which smells different, came out in the 1970s, but many people were still using leaded. The lead in the gas was harmful, but it certainly had a distinctive smell. Another distinctive smell from cars were the vinyl seats, which was especially true if they had been left out in the hot sun. This plastic-type odor could be found on many different cars during the decade. A 1972 Nova with vinyl seats smells completely different than a 1984 Oldsmobile Cutlass with velour seats. Most kids in the 70s loved music, and there was a huge variety to choose from. Record stores had their own smell, and so did the freshly unwrapped album. Stores were a lot more separated back then, and even drugstores smelled completely different than a grocery store. Skincare in the 1970s wasn't something that most people thought about, at least not when it came to protection from the sun. Everyone wanted to get that golden brown look, so sunbathing was very popular. Rarely did anyone ever use sunblock, and if they did, the SPF was pretty low. Most people just wanted to use the different tanning oils that were on the market. They had a coconut smell, and if you happen to catch a whiff of it today, it will probably remind you of a past vacation or a memorable time outside. Kids had numerous toys that had their own smell. If you were into models, then I'm sure you remember how the glue smelled. Cap guns are another item that boys played with, but I would bet that girls were also familiar with the faint smell of gunpowder every time a cap popped. If you are a fan of baseball, then I'm sure you probably purchased some baseball cards at some point. The cards had a smell of their own, but so did the pink stick of bubble gum. It may not have been the best tasting gum, but it sure was exciting to get it. Remember how hard that gum could be? The super elastic bubble plastic had an unforgettable smell. This was a fun toy to play with, but it also had some toxic fumes from the polyvinyl acetate dissolved in acetone. Basically, you squirt some of this in one end of the straw and then blow. The chemicals would then evaporate, turning the liquid into a plastic bubble. It really became dangerous when kids inhaled through the straw rather than blowing after placing the goop on the other end. There are some variations of this toy still on the market today, but the formula has changed a little, and so has the smell. Silly Putty was another fun toy to play with, and it was the closest that 70s kids could get to sharing memes. If you press this harmless putty on your favorite comic strip in the newspaper, you could lift it off and it would be an exact copy of the comic. Silly Putty has its own distinctive smell, and so did the newspapers that had the comics. Not as many people receive the paper today as they did in the 1970s. The other change with the paper is the ink, which is non-transferable. Kids today will never understand the smell of old newspapers, nor the fun of transferring comics in Silly Putty. Creepy crawlers might be a toy that many parents today would consider to be too dangerous to play with. But in the 1970s, every kid wanted one. A kid had to heat up a mini hot plate and then pour in a goop, which was a form of liquid PVC, into a mold. The kit would allow you to make several different things, but it also had an unforgettably strong smell. Linoleum floors were very popular in the 1970s, and if you were around them when they were new or when they were being installed, you'll never forget the smell. And while we are talking about floors, perhaps you'll remember what the future floor wax was like. There is a good possibility your mom used this. She also probably used the vanished crystals in order to clean the toilet. If you didn't see her do it, then you probably smelled it. Fondue sets became a really popular item to have in the 1970s. It was considered fancy and fun, but it also could be messy as well as a hassle. Usually, these were only brought out during special occasions. People used to melt caramel, chocolate, and a variety of cheeses, so there could have been a whole bunch of scents coming from this fondue pot. There is a good chance that this fondue set was used at a Christmas get-together in which you were smelling a live Christmas tree. Nowadays, people seem to prefer the artificial trees. Before the days of digital cameras and smartphones, people gravitated towards Polaroid cameras. This was the only way to instantly see the photo and make sure that it had everyone in it before they left. Do you remember the smell of the Polaroid film canisters? If you do, then I'm sure it brings back memories with friends and family. If you think back to your school days, there were a lot of different smells that you could have experienced. Sure, there were the stinky locker rooms, but what about that pink eraser? Magic markers also had a smell that you would never forget. Over the years, they have changed the formula of the markers so the smell isn't quite the same. The chalkboards with the chalk and erasers even had a faint smell associated with them. Rubber cement was also prevalent in schools. This can still be purchased today, but one quick sniff will probably take you back to a different time. Crayons were another necessary school item that had their own distinctive smell. The pencil sharpeners that were in classrooms had a distinctive sound, but they also had a smell coming from them as they sharpened wooden pencils. Perhaps the greatest smell in school came from the sweet-smelling purple-printed papers that were from the mimeograph or ditto machine. Speaking of school, who can forget about that first day after the summer break? Everyone was excited to be there, and most kids had a new outfit to show off and wear on the first day. Everywhere you went, it smelled like new clothes. Denim certainly had its own smell, and it's been in fashion for many decades. But now jeans can be a blend of different materials. Most of them go through some sort of pre-washing to make them look faded or used. But if you had a pair of those old stiff blue jeans, then they had a much stronger smell. Books and libraries have their own unique smell, but so did the card catalogs that were used. Now those are a thing of the past, and so are these. Phone books that were left in a hot phone booth had an unmistakable smell. Those are some things that kids today will never experience. During the 1970s, there were many products that were on the market. Some of them are no longer sold, but you might be surprised to see how many are still around. For one reason or another, people moved on and stopped using them. However, their scents are probably locked away deep down in your olfactory nerve, and if you ever catch wind of them, they'll certainly take you back. Here are a few of the products that were used in the 70s that you may remember. Let us know if there are any others that we missed.
We've been sliding since I don't remember when, in and out of consciousness. While others might be stressing out, we rely on our facade to help us out.